Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. Now, before we jump into the podcast, I want to give you a quick heads up that on May 14th, 2024, we are going to be launching a brand new resource called Lead Security. On May 14th, we're going to have a release party, so to speak. It's going to be a webinar with a lot of free giveaways, with a lot of information about what this thing is, Lead Security. Well, we believe deep down that your church should be inviting, and yet your church should be secure. And so we've created a master training, as big, if not bigger, than anything we've ever released before. It is the most comprehensive resource on church security. We have a webinar registration in the show notes, both on every podcast that you would like that you listen to, and even on YouTube. We're going to be sending this out to everybody. We want you to register for the Lead Security webinar release. This whole entire master course, master training on how to have a healthy, volunteer-led security team at your church. You don't want to miss it. Join us and click in the show notes to join this webinar registration. Now, we'll jump into the podcast. Hey everybody, grateful that you're here with us on the Lead Ministry Podcast. Love it that you're here. I love to be here. It's something that I look forward to. It is work, right? It is work to compile these things, to have guests, but it's a labor of love, and we do it for three simple reasons. Number one, I really want to help you, the ministry leader. Number one, to get organized. If you're not organized, you're going to be caught off guard, blown up, and destroyed by the needs and the ups and downs of ministry. Number two, we want to help you to stop the revolving door of volunteers. Watch this. If you're not organized, you're going to have a very difficult time caring for volunteers in the way that they need to be cared for. And if you don't care for volunteers in the way that they need cared for, you're going to end up burning out and spinning your wheels in all kinds of different directions. If that's you, you're in for a world of hurt. You got to be organized. You got to care for volunteers so that you can keep them around. But also, you got to, number three, avoid burnout. That's what I'm here for. That's what I'm seeking to do. My name is Josh Denhart, part of the Lead Ministry Podcast, which is a part of the grander Lead Ministry overarching palette of resources that we have to help you, ministry leaders, again, get organized, keep volunteers, and stop burnout. Well, we're doing this little series. And this series is actually quite powerful. It's kind of teeing up this idea that the month of August is Child Safety Awareness Month. So we're doing a dedicated little series on security. But the other piece to this is that we are launching a brand new master training under the Lead Ministry umbrella. It's going to be called Lead Security. It is going to be the most comprehensive resource that exists today to help churches be super inviting and yet also remain secure. Well, I happen to have a partner in crime. We shouldn't say crime, a partner in redemption, a partner in church security. It's Preston Hocker. Preston, grateful that you're here, buddy.
Yeah, grateful to be here. I think you may have mentioned that August is the month.
Did I say August?
I think you said August, but it is in fact April. It is April.
Thank you. It is April.
I got you covered.
Thank you very much. And you know that we're pretty freewheeling here on the podcast. We're not going to go back and edit that out. We're normal people. But yes, it is April. Right now it is April in 2024. And it is Child Security, Child Safety Awareness. We want to keep kids from being injured and harmed. And guess what? If you're in a ministry context, I bet you've read in a pretty reliable source that God will deal with people who do harm to kids with a humongous millstone around their neck and toss them into the middle of the ocean.
Yeah, it'd be better for you to toss or tie a millstone around your neck and toss into the sea than to cause one of God's children to stumble.
Doof.
That's a pretty crazy illustration when you think about it. But it's the level of passion and ferocity that God has towards innocent people.
And if we are
if
we're seeking to be like him, we're going to take this seriously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have to take it seriously. I'm not saying that we need to literally tie millstones around people's necks. I want to be clear, but I think it's definitely an illustration for how ferocious God is when it comes to protecting children.
That's
and treating
exactly
them
right.
correctly.
Well, Preston, grateful that you're here on the podcast. You have been on 2 previous episodes. We talked about like an overview of church security and why it's important, which led us to, well, what grade would you get and where should you start if you have no idea? If you're getting a D- at church security and you're like, oh my word, okay, I get it. Where should I start? You start with child protection.
Yeah, for sure.
Which then led us to, that was our first episode. Our second episode in this little series about church security was about, okay, now that we're talking about background checks, how do you even go about doing that? Well, we recommend going with Protect My Ministry. It's a very, very, very well-founded, one of the largest in the country, easy buttons for you to do background checks. Hyper secure. They are hyper comprehensive. It is the one-stop shop. Definitely Protect My Ministry. But then you do a background check. Sometimes you run into things that you need to talk about. It's like, ooh, can you tell me about your incident back in 2019? Okay, that's legitimate. We're going to do that. So that was our second episode. But this episode is kind of talking about a predator among us. So we're gonna dive deep into a less fun story. I've actually, Preston, if I could be completely transparent, I have always wanted to somehow find a way to share this story with the ministry community at large. This is not a story that you need to make sure that your kids aren't listening to. It's not that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it is a real story. But before we get to this episode of the Lead Ministry Podcast, which is entitled A Predator Among Us, we want to let you know that Preston and I have been laboring far harder than you could ever imagine to create a brand new resource called Lead Security. It is the most comprehensive resource that exists. It's going to be launched on May 14th of 2024. May 14th, 2024, Lead Security, 64 videos, hundreds of downloads that make executing a strategy to have a volunteer security team to help your church be inviting and yet remain secure. It's a massive mother load of a course. Preston, am I right?
Holy cow. Oh man, so right. I never could have imagined how comprehensive and just
voluminous.
Oh my goodness, how huge this course is. When we first started the project, when I was, even before I had talked to you about the project, I was just looking for church security courses online, seeing what there was, and a majority of them focus on like one thing. It's one scope. This is what we're going to focus on. But as a security professional, I know that there are layers to security. And if you don't have layers to your security is
holes.
Vulnerable.
It's holes.
Yeah, you're vulnerable. So we started down this path, writing the course, developing, and holy cow, I never could have imagined how big this thing is. But I'm really happy with the product. I'm really happy with the way things are turning out.
Yes.
And I believe it's going to be such a huge resources for the body of Christ as a whole across the country and beyond.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a game changer to make people's lives easier, right?
Yeah, I think so too. People's lives easier. I believe there are people that genuinely want to make sure their church communities are safe. There are people that want that. I also believe most of those people that want to keep their community safe have no idea how to do that effectively and efficiently. Mm-hmm. So we've developed this resource to help those people that want to help keep people safe, to actually help them achieve those goals.
And achieve them
really
faster.
Excited.
Achieve them faster, right? This is, listen, This is a fast track. That's really what it is. But part of this initiative with the Lead Security Master Training, 64 videos, hundreds of downloads, we also are launching a brand new podcast, which is called the Lead Church Security Podcast. So all of a sudden, listen, you may be in children's ministry and you want a leg up on how to execute background checks or how to execute a code Adam, which is simply nothing more than, hey, a kid is missing in your ministry. Mom and dad are here to pick him up. Guess what? You don't know where they are. If you've ever been there, it is only, that's the worst thing that can ever happen. It's terrifying. The only worse feeling is when you are at Target and your very own kid is missing and it's now the 6th minute that you're looking for them. That is a horrible feeling. The only thing that compares to that is losing somebody else's kid. So bottom line, we do need to deal with this, and we've created this thing, the Lead Church Security Podcast. That'll be launching soon. But today, Preston, we're talking about this really uncomfortable topic of a true, real deal predator among us. What I'm going to share today is a true story that came from my own ministry past. It has, I'm going to tip my hand here, it has a positive ending, but it was extremely tumultuous in the middle.
So why don't you go ahead and jump on into it?
Okay, let's start by saying that background checks are important, but they're not sufficient. Okay. And here's why. We as a church, we actually had normal policies in place. Our normal policies were everybody's getting a background check and it's going to be on repeat. So the individual that I'm going to be speaking about on this podcast, he had a background check. It came back completely flawless. There was nothing that would have indicated that this person should not have been working with kids because he didn't have a history. The reason he didn't have a history, in some ways, Preston, was because he was a professional. He was a professional pedophile. So we had normal policies in place and we had normal communication. What does that mean? That means that we had trainings with our people to let them know we don't sit on laps. We don't do full body, all-encompassing hugs. We do side hugs. We do these. We just have these things. This is our standard protocol. So we got background checks. That's fine. But then here's how we're going to operate in ministry. And so we laid those things out. This was normal communication. We had a normal policy and a pathway. However, this idea of situational awareness, we had the background check, but we didn't all of a sudden say, oh, sweet, background check. Nobody has anything bad. We're safe. That's foolhardy, Preston, is it not?
Yeah. Background checks, I've said it before. Background checks only tell us what people got caught doing.
That's exactly right.
If they haven't been caught, then we don't have anything to work off of.
That's
somebody
right.
Somebody could just be as greasy as they could be, just as dirty as they can be, but have a clean background check. Clean background check does not expose what's going on in somebody's heart. It exposes what they've already done in their past. Okay, so at least what they've already been caught.
That's right.
In their past.
So then this now enters into phase 2, which is having our eyes attuned. Can you speak to situational awareness? And then I will speak to what we did, which, by the way, I didn't know that the term was situational awareness. That's what we now call it now. So go ahead, help us out.
Situational awareness is simply paying attention. In life, especially since the inception of the iPhone or smartphones in general, we've gotten a lot less situationally aware. We start paying attention, or we've stopped paying attention when we should be paying attention.
Right.
And there are some things, especially within the scope of the church or in congregation, there are some things that we ought to be paying attention to. And oftentimes in our society, instead of paying attention to things, and when something doesn't make sense, we, instead of investigating it and saying, hey, why is this like this? Not saying judging somebody right off the bat, but going and being inquisitive.
Yes.
Instead of being inquisitive or investigative, it feels safer and it's more comfortable to just write it off.
I call it, you end up not doing investigation, you actually dismiss it.
we should investigate, but somehow in our society, we have taught ourselves that investigating is being judgmental, and especially in the church, we don't want to be judgmental of people. And if you follow anything that I say, or we talk in the future when we talk like specifically about lead security, or if you end up getting that course, you'll find it's okay. You're not being judgmental by being investigative, and we're not disqualifying somebody from anything. We're not disqualifying somebody from the kingdom. We're not disqualifying somebody from ministry just by saying, "Hey, this is what I saw. Can you explain that to me?"
Yes.
And that can feel very intrusive, but sometimes that's what it requires to keep, especially the most innocent being children, keep them safe.
Okay, so here's what ended up happening. We had our normal background checks. We had our normal policies, and myself, and I was overseeing both children in junior high at the time, and the junior high pastor and myself were standing in the church kind of basement atrium type area, and we saw this volunteer who was very well known, very well loved. The senior pastor had him up on the main stage. He was a very well-known entity, but he was walking arm in arm with a couple of kids on either side like this. And okay, fine. This wasn't what we had. This wasn't part of our policy. We didn't really want that to take place. And we just saw a lot of like big, hardcore frontal hugs and a lot of hanging on and a lot of, just touching kids. Now, none of this was inappropriate, but it just didn't set well. And so all of a sudden, we're on this idea of situational awareness. We were like, okay, I'm paying attention. That doesn't seem as normal, not to mention it goes against the communication and the policies that we have in place. We talked to you at the very beginning of the year that we don't do these particular behaviors. We're observing you do these particular behaviors. So guess what? We didn't overlook it. We had what I'm calling conversation one. And we took this individual to a coffee house at 6:30 in the morning. We sat in a particular place in that coffee house and we had a conversation. Now, Preston, here's how the conversation went. I said to this individual, hey, I just want to let you know that there are 5 different love languages. You've got physical touch. You have gifts, or like gifts that you can give. You have acts of service. You have words of affirmation. Please don't leave me hanging. What's the last one?
Quality.
Thank you. Quality time. And I said,
it's my wife's. I should
okay, very good. Very good. So we have these 5 love languages, and it appears as if you're really focusing on this one, physical touch. And what we want to let you know is we want you to love kids, but we got to let you know we're going to ask you from here on out to not use that particular language at all moving forward whatsoever. Here's what we observed. Arms around kids, full frontal hugs. Here's actually the policy that you kind of agreed to. This is outside of the scope. You're doing things that are outside of what we would want. So are we clear? No more walking through the halls arm in arm, no more front hugs. Oh, my word. Super apologetic. Oh, I totally get it. I really like how you brought up this idea of the 5 love languages, and I'm really going to focus on using those others. Okay, that's great. Guess what? Oh, go ahead, Preston. You're going to say something.
No, I just really appreciate the fact that you talked to them, because so many people will brush it under the rug. And one of the things that happens in leadership is when we decide not to talk to somebody, not to bring it to their attention, what it looks like is permission. We're giving people permission to act in a specific way. Then we get upset when it gets pushed to, you're saying like hugs and like the types of physical touch that you're saying isn't criminal.
No,
it's not overtly like inappropriate. It's outside of the scope of your policy. But for so many people in leadership, they allow these types of activities to occur because, well, he's not really hurting anybody. But then once he does get to a position of criminal behavior, now we're going to throw a fit over it when we've been allowing behavior for months leading up to what we could call an event.
So, Preston, I am telling you, and by the way, you have to understand that this wasn't just like a regular Joe Blow volunteer. He had worked himself into the fabric of our church, and he had found himself on the main stage being interviewed by the senior pastor. We had a banner, I'm telling you, a banner in our atrium that was like 17 times larger than life hanging down with his picture on it. Okay.
Oh, that hurts.
So
that's a gut punch.
This is a gut punch, but watch this. That would have been an easy thing for us to say, oh, it's him. He's just that. It's just him. So it's super easy
that's the way he is. Isn't that one of like the fallback like excuses? Well, he's not really meaning anything by it. That's just the way he is.
Okay. So our normal policies coupled with our situational awareness cause us to go, hey, can we talk about that? And when we talked about it, he seemed to be completely copacetic. He was like, no problem whatsoever. And in my mind, I wasn't done observing, but I had lowered this from is this a red? Okay, we've got maybe situation red. What would you call this? What do we call this?
Oh, green, yellow, red. So like green is go.
Yep.
Yellow is there might be something there, and red is we got to do something now.
Okay, so this was like a yellow at this point when I saw that he was walking arm in arm with kids and a lot of hugs. So we had a conversation about it. And then guess what?
You weren't even thinking about, like, we talk about the Left of Bang book.
The Left of Bang, yes.
Recommend.
I just got that book today, mind you. Keep going.
You're going to love it. But in the book, Patrick Van Horn talks about the combat rule of 3. And you didn't know about the combat rule of 3. You were just kind of naturally responding according to the combat rule of 3. And, you saw the guy arm in arm with some kids, maybe an extra hug and X, Y, and Z, and it caused you to do something, which is what the combat rule of 3 requires, an action.
Now I'm gonna take this right here. I'm gonna change to a different screen. For watching on YouTube, this is very visual in nature, and here you have a yellow flag. You're like, oh, that's weird. And then here you have a second yellow flag. You're like, that's doubly weird. And once you have a third yellow flag, the combat rule of, watch this now, 1, 2, 3 yellow flags elevates this to become one humongous red flag that can no longer be denied. We have bad. We're going to call this bad, right?
Yeah.
We have bad. Yeah. So bottom line is that we saw that we saw this flag. We're like, okay, hang on. Let's talk about that. Then the next very week, we literally saw this individual walking down the hall of church, and he saw us see him arm in arm with kids, and he had a holy crap look on his face. And that was on a Sunday. Monday morning, we were back at that exact same coffee shop at the exact same time, at the exact same seats, and we all sat in the same place. Now, Press, you might be like, well, whoopsie. You might be like, wow, was that like did you do that on purpose? Fundamentally, we did. I wanted to have the recollection of our previous conversation. You sat here, we sat here. It was the same time, same place. And I said, the tone had changed now. And I said, I got to let you know, the last time we sat here, we overtly told you to stop using the love language of physical touch in any way, shape, or form. Did you hear us then? And he said, yes. And I said, I got to let you know. Now, Preston, I elevated this. Now, I elevated. This is now we're orange, getting close to red. And I said to him, I want to let you know, I'm going to define something for you. It's called grooming. And there are behaviors that somebody could use to begin to lower the feelings of danger in a potential victim. And I'm not accusing you of anything, but I got to let you know, I am concerned that you literally just heard us say, don't do this, and now you're doing it again. And so in some ways, Preston, and I want to get your rebuke on this, should we have pulled the plug right then? The answer is probably yes. Well,
it's hard to give a definitive because I wasn't there, don't know all of all of the external factors.
Yes.
But in hindsight's always 20/20. In hindsight, you look back and go, we probably could have, maybe not should have, but we definitely could have gone ahead and pulled the plug.
Okay, thank you.
Then I wouldn't say that you did anything incorrectly. I think you were doing the best that you could with the information that you had, both from your experience in ministry,
yes,
because you had never been in this specific scenario before. So you're doing your best with the information that you have from experience, but also the information that you have from this guy that you're having to have these conversations with. So maybe in hindsight you could have, but or maybe even should have, but I don't think you did anything incorrect.
Okay.
I think you were trying to reflect God the whole time.
So we had conversation 1, we had conversation 2, and I literally broached the idea that this could be nefarious grooming behavior. Mm-hmm. Just throwing it out there. And he said, oh, okay, I am so sorry. I understand. Completely get it. Will never happen again. And I said, I want to let you know, like we're done. This is it. If this happens again, it's game completely over, and we're watching. It's a wrap. Okay. A number of weeks transpired, and it was on a Wednesday night, and then a really bad thing came knocking at our door. We had 2 parents who came to us, and they had basically a quarter of a ream of paper of text message transcriptions between this guy and their junior high son. And okay, do we want a junior high volunteer to be swearing in texts with our kids? No, we don't want that. But the language that he was using and the intentionality with which he was truly grooming this kid and setting up something for an upcoming weekend, I'm telling you, this was our absolute worst nightmare.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so then we kicked into high gear at that point, Preston. Yes, we had but let me just pause real quick. We had our normal policies in place, and we had told this individual and 80 others at a training, here's the things that we do and we don't do. We communicated all of that, and background checks had been done. We had this situational awareness thing where we're like, what? That's odd. We didn't dismiss it. We had a conversation to say that's not cool. We had a second conversation to go, hey, we noticed this again. We're actually super serious. And then, lo and behold, we had these parents showing us that there was nefarious activity that was happening under the radar that none of us knew. Mm-hmm. So we immediately had what I'm going to call conversation 3. This conversation was now not myself and the junior high person at a coffee shop. This was in one of the senior leaders' office. So we had Josh, we had the other junior high pastor, and now we had an elder pastor at our church. And we had the holy smokes conversation. We showed him the transcript. We had a really, really, really hard conversation. And we said, what do you make of, we listed off several lines, and he was stoic. He was silent. He didn't say, he downplayed it all. We said, do you have anything to say? He said, I have nothing to say. He was caught. And now what I'm getting ready to share with you, Preston, is the hardest part of this story. We said to him, first, wait, this part that I'm going to share is not the hardest part.
Okay.
This part was, you are officially banned from participating in any aspect of our church life whatsoever. Mm-hmm. You can no longer come onto our property ever. By the way, trust me, I'd already been in touch with the police. I'd already been in touch with DHS. And can I be honest with you? This guy was such a professional that nothing that he had said, it was up to the line, but it did not cross the line. And so he knew his wording so that it wasn't actually illegal. So we went through all of that stuff, but then we brought it to a head with, this big meeting, and we told him that he was now excluded from our church. He could not participate. And then this was the hard part. We asked him whether or not he wanted help and coaching and counseling in order to rid himself of his pedophilic tendencies and his behaviors. Do you want help for this? And He did not. Now, I have to tell you, in my flesh, I was like, I want nothing to do with helping this guy whatsoever.
Yeah.
But our pastoral duties, it just is what it is. Was it going to happen on site at our church? The answer is no. But if he was repentant and if he was wanting help, you know, that was going to be a hard pill to swallow, but that's what we were going to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
yeah, you guys did. It sounds like you guys did excellent. Tried your best to reflect God's love to him, even in frustration. You know, like I think that's what Jesus intended when he said, you know, love your enemies. Yeah. You've heard, you know, eye for an eye, you know, I say love your enemies. I think sometimes we don't really know what love your enemy is. I think love your enemy has to do with people you're really mad at, you're really frustrated at. And how do we love them? We do things that are kind of inconvenient for us to do.
That's right.
To help them get the help that they need. So I think you guys did just about as good as you could do with the situation that you were given. Now,
I want to share a couple of quick things. Number one, our senior pastor, he came to my office 2 times in my 10 years. Okay. I had meetings with him in his office and all that, but it was a big enough deal. He came to my office and he said, tell me right now, did this guy have a background check? And I said, did you run a background check on this guy? And I said, yes. Was there anything on it? And I said, no. And he goes, okay. I mean, think how horrible the situation would have been if we had not run a background check and there was something on there about this guy. So we had done our due diligence. We had done everything right, but it was the gift of the Holy Spirit illuminating our eyes to see a nefarious actor playing out a scenario where he was grooming kids for nefarious and bad activities. God saved the day. God saved the day.
I'd be really interested to know where that guy is today. I'd be really interested to know.
We're going to end this podcast in a second, but I'll tell you at least one thing, because about 4 or 5 years later, I looked him up on Facebook and I saw that he was arm in arm with another kid. And I looked up where he was working. Maybe I shouldn't have done this. And I called that place of business and I said, hey, I just want to let you know. And he was like, you've got to be kidding me. He explained all of these anomalous behaviors. And he said,
good for you.
This is insane. And I said, he's up to it again. And I said, I bet you that and I listed off a thing. He says, that's exactly what it is. So he was still up to the same things. That's a true story. I don't know if I've ever even told anybody that, Preston, because I did follow up because I was that concerned. And lo and behold, he was doing something else. And this other boss had some yellow flags that he just didn't know what to do with. Well, at the end of the day, we are wanting, and that's why we created Lead Security, is to give people a crystal clear, non-negotiated pathway for exactly what to do in a situation like this. Guess what? Myself and the junior high guy, we had never dealt with this before. We didn't have a script. We just figured it out. But together, Preston, you and I have created this crazy thing, Lead Security, that will be coming out May 14th. And it is...
excited.
And I'm excited too. And it has every script that you would need to at least have a starting point to know how to talk about these really, really, really delicate things. So, bottom line, we had this third conversation. We did X him from our church. If he would have wanted to have, been repentant, we would have figured a way to try to provide counseling and coaching to a repentant soul. The final thing I want to say is I had to guard myself against paranoia. It was such a traumatic event for me that the elder pastor who navigated that third meeting with us, he pulled myself and the junior high guy aside and he said, gang, I want to let you know, you are going to come into contact with a brain schemata and a set of goggles, and you are going to think that everybody that you see is a particular pedophile. And that is exactly what happened. So I had to guard myself against thinking that everybody was suspect at that point. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. Those kinds of situations you just can't come back from. Luckily and thankfully,
no kids were harmed in this scenario.
On your watch, right? I could name.
I do want to throw out that there were 3 other kids that he was doing this same texting with. So we sent out a letter to every single parent. We're like, word to the wise, have a conversation with your kid. So a total of 4 kids, the one that we already knew about, and then 3 others, he was having this same type of grooming behavior. So thank you, God, that this thing was stopped. But it was nothing short of having a set of policies in place, but also having an eye for and a heart tuned into the Holy Spirit to see anomalous type of behavior.
Yeah. It's incredible.
Well,
like I was going to say, like, in my years of ministry, I could, just off the top of my head, I could tell you 3 stories that are similar to what your story was.
So in other words, these are not like these things happen.
Unfortunately, yeah. So like these guys are predators, and they act similar to like predatorial cats. You know, they go to where the food is. You know, cats jaguars or tigers, they go to where the gazelles are. They don't want to like they don't go fishing. You know, like they're not they're not reeling them in. They're going to go to where the kids are. Kids are at schools and kids are at churches. Yep. And so a lot of people talk about the statistics of, pedophiles at churches. Well, statistics regarding pedophiles at churches are very similar to statistics of pedophiles at schools. We don't talk about schools so much, but we talk about kids. And that's not to say that it's not bad at churches. It's bad everywhere.
Yes.
That's why we need security. That's why we need to teach our people how to be situational aware. We need to empower our people to have tough conversations. We got to teach them how to tap into the boldness that is available to them through the power of the Holy Spirit to have tough conversations. That's why these things are so important.
Yes. Well, and that's why we created Lead Security. We're waiting, in a sense, with bated breath for this to be released. It's going to be released on May 14th. It is the most comprehensive resource that exists today. But gang, bottom line, we are just so grateful that you folks are here. Thank you again for joining us on this, a little bit of a tougher conversation. And I don't want you to be paranoid, but I want you to be prepared. Gang, thanks again so much for hanging with us with the Lead Ministry podcast, and we'll catch you guys on the next one.